Hello. It's Mrs. Richmond with Phoenix. He's just been doing his best / worst impressions of me saying, hello, it's Mrs. Richmond with Phoenix. It is me with this. We're on chapter 31. I am shattered and old, and I'm getting to the point where I have to read like this. Do you have parents that do that? Probably grandparents.
Why don't you wear your glasses?
Because I've got my contact lenses in. You can't just keep adding them on. Jeepers. Right, previously on Phoenix, what did happen?
They landed on Charon and loads of people were there, and they were they've been sent to prison on Charon, the planet of ice, and they crashed the Sunfire, and Nox did, Frolix did something weird with the strings, so they fluttered down.
Yeah, so they crash landed, opened the doors, and all the Axa were there.
Alive. Mystica's just alive.
And Mystica's just alive. I'm just going to make that silent so we don't have that doing that in the middle.
And I'll unplug this.
Yeah, we'll unplug Alexa so she doesn't get confused like she did last time.
That was very funny.
It was quite funny. Right. So yeah, they've crash landed on whatever planet, Charon. And they opened the doors, and the Axa are there, and they've taken them prisoner.
Yeah,
that's it. Lucky and his friends were bound in electro cuffs and marched away from the Sunfire. They had to lead the captain by the hand. Mystica was still unconscious. The tears were freezing down Frolix's face. Bixa was silent, but she was watching everything with her silver eyes, her thoughts unreadable. The wind lashed into them as they stumbled through the snow. Lucky was beginning to feel numb inside as well as out. What was he supposed to do now? Whatever happens, don't ever give up. You are the only person in the galaxy who can find your father. I am counting on you, and so is he. They came to a halt by the camp. There were squadrons of Skyhawks and ranks of troopers, rows of cabins and bunkers, and a fully operational base. They were led at cannon point through the gates into the ground. Axa troopers searched them as they went. They were allowed to keep only their clothes. Their possessions were taken, as they had been at the space wall. The troopers seized Bixa's cannon and armour, though they didn't notice her needles because she'd retracted them deep into her hair again. But they wrenched the astrolabe away from Lucky, even as he begged and pleaded to keep it. Down into the darkness they were led, down steps, through corridors, and even further underground. Lucky lost track of the way. His head spun with all the twists and turns they took. They were then taken finally into freezing cold cavern, shielded by steel doors with a detachment of troopers standing guard outside. The walls and floor were solid rock encrusted with ice. Vidcams on the ceiling kept everything under the surveillance. A dim blue lamp provided the only light, just enough to show how hopeless it was. The cavern was crowded with ragged-looking prisoners, huddled together for warmth. Some of them were human, some were Axa. Many had the black hole eyes and the million-mile stare, just like Captain Nox. In the cold blue light, they looked as if they were dead already. All colour drained from their faces, all hope abandoned. Mystica Grandax, came a voice from one of the Axa prisoners. Can that be the Star Talker of the present? Whispers rippled through the prisoners as Frolix settled Mystica and the captain down among them. Who are these people? Lucky asked Bixa. King Theobrima's dirty secret, she said. All the Axa who opposed the war. I guess the army lock 'em up here. She glanced back into the gloom. As for those humans, they must be captured shadow guards, prisoners of war. Meanwhile, Frolix was talking to some Axa prisoners sitting near him. There was a seriousness about Frolix that Lucky had never seen in his friend before. Some of the people in these caves came from Aquarius Nebula, he told Lucky and Bixa. I need to find them. I need to hear their stories, to understand what happened here. Then I'll come with you, said Bixa. And I have to find my father, said Lucky. He must be here, somewhere. They left Mystica and Nox in the care of their fellow Axa prisoners. Frolics and Bixer headed in one direction. Lucky went in the other. He made his way through the cavern, picking a path through clusters of people. He found a group of humans in a corner, packed tight, looking down with sunken eyes. From the smells, he could tell they haven't washed for a long time. The men were unshaven and their beards were bushy. The women's hair was tangled and wild. It was shocking to see them like that. Could they really be the people he feared so much? "Are you shadow guards?" he asked them. "We used to be," said one, cowering away from him. "Please don't hurt us." "Shadow guards," said another, shivering. "Nothing matters," croaked a third in a broken sounding voice. "Nothing matters anymore." Lucky shuddered. Some of these people had the living death so badly they couldn't even speak properly. They were painfully thin. They hadn't eaten for far too long, yet they didn't seem to care. They just lay there as if dissolving. "I'm looking for Major Dashwood," he told them. "Has anyone seen him?" Dashwood? He was down that way. Lucky's heart beat faster. So his father was here, in these very caves, maybe only a few steps away. The man he'd crossed the galaxy to find. He picked up his pace as he pressed on through the cavern, past bound and chained prisoners of war. "I'm looking for Major Dashwood," he called as he went. No one answered. "Major Dashwood," he shouted, louder now, but still no response. "Major Dashwood," called Lucky, beginning to panic. "Who's there?" came a weak voice. Lucky squinted through the bodies, through the dark blue gloom, into the shadows, and found himself looking at the face that had watched over his whole childhood. The man with the moustache, in his starship commander's uniform. The man looked very different now. He was still handsome, but he had aged so much. His uniform was torn to tatters. There were deep lines scored in his face and marks of brutality on his body. It was almost impossible to imagine this man smiling. But it was him. Lucky was sure of it. He hesitated a moment, his heart beating hard. He felt as if his whole life had been leading up to that moment. Are you Major Dashwood?" he asked at last. "Yes, I am," said the man, peering up at him from the icy ground. "Who are you?" "I'm Lucky. I'm your son." Major Dashwood looked bewildered. "My son? And you're my father?" The words began to pour out of Lucky as the feelings welled up inside. "I've come such a long way to find you, and I'll take care of you. Don't worry, I'll rescue you. I'll get you out of here. But I need to know everything about myself, who I really am, why I'm like this." But Major Dashwood was shaking his head. "I'm not your father, young man," he said. "You're Axa. I'm human. We're different." "No," said Lucky, ripping out the contact lenses and unbraiding his horns of hair. "This is just a disguise. It's not real. I'm human like you." "But I can't be your father," the man said. "I never had any children." "You didn't?" Lucky bit his lip. "But you're in the vidpic," he insisted. "With my mother and me. I was a baby. You were smiling at me by the Aquarius Nebula." Major Dashwood's eyes widened. "Just a moment. You're Deanna's son?" "Yes," Lucky paused, heart on a knife edge. "At least, I think so. My mother never told me her real name, but she called herself Diana Ashbourne." "That name was my idea," the Major said. "I thought it up when I helped her escape." He ran his fingers through his hair, pushing it back from his eyes so he could see Lucky more clearly. "Diana's son. How extraordinary." "No, I'm certainly not your father. I was only a friend of your mother's. We were shadow guards together. I did everything I could to help her. But where is she?" Lucky looked down. Couldn't answer. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of water dripping echoed in the caves. "Oh, said Major Dashwood. I am so sorry. Lucky bit his mouth until he could taste salt blood and burning. So, you're really not my father? Of course not. Whatever made you think I was? That's what she told me. She never talked about you much, but she loved that vid pic. It was always on our screens. Is that so? Major Dashwood looked down at the icy rock beneath him. Lucky was beginning to shake. So it was just another lie, like everything else. Oh, I wish I was your father, the Major sighed. It sounded like it came from the depths of his being, and his breath made a tiny cloud of condensation in the freezing air. I loved her, you know. I'd have done anything for Diana. But she never thought of me that way. She loved someone else. Who? Your father, of course. She never told me who he was. She was always rather mysterious about it. All I know is she was so desperate to get away in the end from him, from the government, from everything, and she was right to get out. The war has made fools of us all. The things I've seen and done since she left, I wish I could forget. He shook his head violently and covered his face with his thin, bony hands. He turned away from Lucky, eyes clenched shut, and sat there in the shadows, shivering. Please, enough of the questions. Leave me be. Lucky stared at him, stunned. He could not believe it. He'd done the impossible, at a cost so great he could not bear to think of it. He'd found Sharon, he'd found Major Dashwood, and yet it was all for nothing. All of it, everything he'd been through, meant nothing. His whole life, his childhood, his most precious memories and beliefs, everything was a lie. Why had his mother felt the need to lie to him about everything? Why? And if his father wasn't Major Dashwood, then who was? He sat there in silence, hoping the Major would speak to him again, but the Major looked like he might never speak again. The only sound Lucky could hear was water dripping in the distance. He peered around and saw a little rivulet rolling down the cavern's sides. The ice itself seemed to be weeping. Then he heard the voices of his friends coming toward him, and a wave of comfort washed through him. It was good to see them. What would he ever do without them? Lucky, are you okay? Said Bixer. She and Frolics came out of the dark blue gloom and peered down at Major Dashwood. Is that him? Have you found him? Lucky shook his head. It's Major Dashwood, but he's not my father. He was just my mother's friends. They were shadow guards together. Doesn't look so scary now, does he? Mused Bixer. None of them do. Major Dashwood did not respond or make the slightest sign that he was listening. He just sat there in silence, shivering. I'm sorry, Lucky told his friends. I brought you here for nothing. He looked down at the ice in misery. Did you find what you were looking for, at least? Very few people survived the catastrophe in the nebula, said Frolics. I can't make sense of their stories. They're all talking about that strange shadow we saw in space. They say it created the wolf that eats the stars. They say this wolf devoured Aquarius Nebula, and it's going to destroy the whole galaxy. Yes, murmured Major Dashwood, to everyone's surprise. His eyes were open again, and they were filled with dread. I was there. I saw it all. You saw the nebula when it died, said Frolics. Please, tell me what happened. The Major glanced sharply at the ceiling. A vidcam whirred there above their heads. He waited for its gaze to move on before he replied, and when he did, it was in a whisper. I don't know if they can hear us, but these secrets are not for their ears. Only yours. He glanced at Lucky. It's only right that you should know the truth. After all, the nebula was your mother's favourite place in the whole galaxy. It's where you were born. Did she ever tell you that? Lucky shook his head glumly. What could this matter now? She would have hated us for what we did, the Major went on, because we were the ones who did it. Humanity. We destroyed the nebula. But why? Said Frolics. Why would anyone do a thing like that? We needed to harvest the energy of the stars, to power our civilization, to help us fight the war, said the Major. He straightened his tattered uniform and sat up smartly, as if remembering better days. We developed a secret new technology, dark matter technology, like a dark matter bomb, but much more powerful. We call it the Star Burner. It cuts into the heart of a star, breaking apart the connections that hold stars together, making them release all their power, so we can siphon that power off and channel it anywhere we choose. Without it, we could never maintain the space wall. Lucky's scalp prickled with horror. The space wall? Oh no, is that how you power it? By killing stars? We had to keep humanity safe, and besides, we tested the Star Burner on one of the smallest stars in the nebula, far from any population centres. It should have been safe. It should have benefited everyone. But things did not go as we planned. As the dark matter connections unravelled, something strange and terrible was unleashed, something we didn't expect. No matter how you look at it, your mind couldn't get a grip on it. Your eyes kept sliding away. I've seen something like that, said Bixer. It was on Scorpio, just after the dark matter bomb, at the centre of the wheel. It was so weird, I thought I was imagining it. She turned to Lucky. Did you see it too? Yeah, he said, skin crawling at the memory. I did, and I think I might have seen it again somewhere. But what is it? Nothing, whispered Major Dashwood, and his eyes sunken, hollow, haunted. Absolute nothing. It's the void that lies behind all reality, the negation of all things, the force that will one day destroy everything. This is what lies at the heart of a black hole, and that is what we saw when we killed a star. A black hole. Lucky shivered. But don't black holes destroy everything around them? Bixer asked the Major. If you were close enough to see one, why didn't it destroy you too? I wish it had, he replied, but black holes are made from the bodies of dead stars. The bigger the star, the bigger the black hole. The star we destroyed made a small one. It collapsed rapidly, and we were distant enough to escape it. Yet in the brief moment it existed, it was still strong enough to devour an entire nebula. The wolf that eats the stars, gasped Frolics. The blue fire sparked in his eyes. But if the wolf is a black hole, how can you fight a thing like that? You can't. Major Dashwood covered his face with his hands, trying in vain to close out a sight that he could never forget. If you have seen a dark matter bomb, scale it up 1 billion times. You'll understand why. You'll see dark matter bombs damage the fabric of space-time just enough to reveal the merest glimpse of the void. Everyone who sees it feels profound despair. The mind retreats from the horror and turns in on itself. Nothing matters anymore. Everything seems meaningless. This may happen at once, or it may take years, but you may recover from it, or you may not. But sooner or later you will suffer the living death. Lucky looked around the caves at all the people with black hole eyes. The captain, breathed Bixer. He flew through dark matter bombs when he saved us. Remember, Frolics? Maybe he got the living death all those years ago, and he's been fighting it ever since. But something must have pushed him over the edge. Aquarius, Frolics shook his head grimly. I tried to stop him, but he was looking right into the star as it flashed. Aquarius, gasped Major Dashwood. Please tell me they're not using the Star Burner on Aquarius itself. It's going supernova right now, said Lucky, his mind flinching at the memory of the dying star's screams. That's where we saw the Star Burner, and I think that was where I saw the nothing again. Horror warped in Dashwood's features. Before I was captured, I told them not to use it again. I warned them, the dangers. If a massive star like Aquarius dies before its time, the resulting black hole would be so vast nothing could possibly escape. It would be the end of all worlds, the end of all stars, the end of everything. That was Gala's prophecy. If Aquarius goes, everything goes. It doesn't have to happen, said Major Dashwood. A last desperate hope flickered across his face. If only Thorntree and Theobroma would talk to each other and stop this senseless war. If only they would make peace. He bit his lip, shook his head. But how can there be peace? No one will make the first move. No one will back down. With a deep, deep sigh, he shut his eyes, and his body began to shiver and shake in the cold blue light. No, he said, there is no hope. The end is coming, and we cannot stop it. Death would be a mercy now. It's got a bit bleak.
I'm thinking that maybe they will destroy Aquarius, and then that'll take them to the 12 Astreas.
Do you reckon?
And Thingy's dad, Loki's dad, is Theobroma.
Theobroma?
Yeah. And then she ran away from him because he's part of the government. He's part of a government.
Well, is Theobroma not an Axa?
He is an Axa.
So you think Loki's half human, half Axa?
Yeah, like Frolix and Bixa. Their dad was a human and mum was an Axa.
My eyes are tired. Hope you enjoyed that. We're so near the end. It feels like we're on the cusp of like the final bit. I'm a bit gutted that Major Dashwood isn't his... I mean, fancy giving your child like information at death. It must be accurate. If you're not going to give the information that's accurate, don't bother. Do you know what I mean? That's irritating. Even if she just made it up while she didn't think there was a problem. When they were running away, she should have said, by the way, that guy in the vid pic, he is a friend of mine, but he isn't your dad. Your dad's name is...
whatever.
Jimbo. Or whatever.
Hello, art is Jimbo. Art is your daddy.
Anywho, see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.